Mr. Stahl, thank you very much for your testimony, for your leadership, and thank you to Dr. Shah, the head of USAID. I think USAID is trying to respond as effectively as possible. So, again, I want to give you high marks, and I know I'm joined by members of the committee. It is difficult to get humanitarian aid on the ground in a war situation when even the aid workers are put at high risk. So, appreciate your commitment. Let me begin with some questions. First of all, let me ask Tom Malinowski, the Assistant Secretary, if you would. Tom Farr, who we all know is one of the preeminent, he's the quintessential leader, I think, when it comes to religious freedom. I've read his book. As you know, I chaired all of the hearings that led to the enactment of the International Religious Freedom Act, Frank Wolf's landmark legislation on religious freedom. At the time, you will recall, the Clinton administration was opposed to it. John Shattuck, the Assistant Secretary in your previous position, sat right where you sit and testified against it on frequent occasions. And when the bill was finally passed, House and Senate, in huge bipartisan majorities, the President signed it. But I've always been concerned that a bias against that mission has pervaded and persisted many in the State Department, particularly at the higher levels. So much so, and Tom Farr makes this point in his testimony, and I quote him in pertinent part, that while no administration has been successful in promoting religious freedom, the issue has been especially low priority under the current president. It points out that the ambassador at large position was vacant for half of the Obama administration's tenure in office, which is a revelation of priorities, in my opinion. And we've had hearings on it in this committee. We've asked, we've begged, we've admonished, we've used every word we could possibly think of, I and members of the committee, to encourage the president to take that step and make that an important office. But also, and I know, there is a man, we know the rabbi very well, that's slated for that position. He'll do a fine job, but it's been a very checkered past, recent past. And I mention that because Tom Farr again makes a very, very important series of recommendations as well as observations. He points out that the threat to Christians and other minorities in this region was not ultimately caused by the U.S. military action or the struggle for democracy. The root cause is Islamic terrorism of the kind that hit us on 9/11. That phenomenon finds its origins in radical and spreading interpretation of Islam, nourished and subsidized by secular and religious Middle Eastern tyrants. It seems to me that any strategy has to incorporate trying to get after the laws, the policies that just make religious pluralism and tolerance non-existent in many of these countries with whom we are strong allies with. So my question would be, how do you respond to that criticism? That religious freedom has not had the dominance, the rightful place would be the better way of putting it, within the administration. And secondly, was the administration late in recognizing the ISIS threat as well as the Syria threat? Last year, right around now, the distinguished gentlelady from Florida, Ileana Ross-Layton, and I chaired a hearing on Syria. And we had a witness, the government witnesses wouldn't call it a genocide. Every one of the private sector religiously based witnesses said it is indeed a genocide what is happening in Syria. And my question thirdly to you would be, is what's happening to the Christians in Iraq and Syria today a genocide? Mr. Secretary.
Thank you. There's quite a few. I'll try to tackle all of them. First, on the importance of religious freedom, I hear you, we hear you. The central point of my testimony is that this begins before we have beheadings and Mosul taken and cities falling and hundreds of thousands of refugees. This begins with policies that exploit religious difference for political ends. That's what we had in Iraq, that's what we had in Syria. And the foundational principle of our efforts on religious freedom is not just that that these kinds of abuses are bad things. It's not just that they offend our conscience. It's that when cynical political actors exploit religion, when they go after people because of these incredibly deeply rooted feelings that people of faith have, it is one of the most dangerous things that can happen in the world. That the conflicts that begin that way are very, very difficult to end. And so that's why it is a priority, should be a priority, will continue to be a priority. In this crisis, the most important part of the Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor has been our Religious Freedom Office. They have been on the front lines. They've been bringing the stories of these the victims of ISIL to everybody in the administration, all the way up to the President, and I think you'll hear some of that reflected tonight in his speech, to the planners at CENTCOM who are organizing this operation. You mentioned Rabbi David Saperstein. He's the President's nominee. He is one of the most distinguished leaders on human rights and religious freedom in this country. He has his hearing in the Senate tomorrow. We hope he will be confirmed very, very quickly. And I think the importance of his job in the estimation of all of us, the urgency of that effort, has only gone up in the last few weeks. Were we late? Were we early? We'll have these debates for a very long time. I think both of you mentioned, you and Ms. Ross-Layton, you raised the question of why did we act when we acted as against before or after. I can tell you there are absolutely no distinctions here, and nor should there be, nor will there be, between Christians, Yazidis, Shia, Sunni, or what have you. We didn't act when we acted on Mount Sinjar because those were Yazidis on that mountain as against another group of people. We acted because there were people who were in a uniquely perilous situation, thousands of them surrounded with no way out. The same thing happened in Amerli with a different religious minority. We acted because we had the intelligence, and we acted, and this is particularly important in light of both of your questions, because we had capable partners on the ground who at that point were ready to act with us. There's not much that you can do from the air in a situation where you're trying to rescue men, women, and children if you don't have capable partners on the ground who are ready and willing to act with you. And at that point we did. Several months ago, sadly, we didn't, which is why a huge part of this effort in Iraq in particular has been trying to get a more inclusive, more capable, more committed government, which we now have. And that is the basis of the strategy that the President will announce tonight. As for your question on genocide, I've been around that so many times, from the early days of the Bosnia crisis to Kosovo to Darfur. And all I can tell you is that I have never experienced a situation of mass killing, of mass atrocities, in which the lawyers were ready with a legal determination of genocide, and that's what it takes for the State Department to be able to make that formal determination, in time for us to be able to decide on a course of action. The decision to act inevitably, invariably comes before the experts, the international law experts, come together around a definition, and we have decided to act. And that's the important thing. We are doing right now exactly what we would be doing if the Secretary of State had already determined that genocide as a legal matter had taken place. The determination, those kinds of determinations do become important when you get to the legal process, where you get to accountability, where you get to justice, and you prosecute people for what they did. But
on that point, if I could ask you, because we're almost out of time, do you support, does the administration support a regional court? You know, the ICC has already been rejected. It has only one conviction, as you know, over the course of a dozen years. Several indictees, but one conviction. And as David Crane testified recently here in this room, the chief prosecutor at the Sierra Leone court, the ICC is not the means to hold these people to account. A regional court, a hybrid, something like Sierra Leone might be the best way to go.
I think it's worth exploring. What I can tell you is that we are committed to ensuring that these people are brought to justice. All those in this conflict who commit war crimes, crimes against humanity, if they are captured, can, should, and will be brought to justice. A regional tribunal would also require the assent of the Security Council. So you still have the same problem.
But Russia, you'll recall with Yugoslavia, even though they were close allies with Milosevic, agreed because all sides would be prosecuted.
Absolutely. But so we would need that.
Possibility. But
different
it needs to be
time.
initiated in order for it to happen.
But the principle of it, I think there are a variety of mechanisms through which you could get to that point, both national, international, and hybrid, and we support the concept. We need to find the most practical way to do it.
Ms. Best.